Good morning, everyone. A warm welcome to each one of you. Thank you for joining into the Design Culture Series 2, an initiative by the Arch College of Design and Business in order to enrich, enthuse, and sensitize aspiring design students, practitioners, academicians to the importance of design. Last year, Arch has conducted 16 such sessions, and this time we have 12 experts over the span of 4 weeks. Arch College of Design and Business is an institution of global repute and has been providing higher education pathways in the field of design and business. Our institution has developed as a center of excellence in teaching, learning, and innovation. In the last 22 years, we have educated more than 7,000 young people into professionals, entrepreneurs from across the country and neighboring nations. Let us welcome Ms. Shivani Singhal, Head Dharohar. Thank you, Shivani, for joining in. Over to you. To add on a small introduction, Dharohar, a non-profit building resilient communities of lifelong learners through structured volunteering programs around learning and green spaces. Before this, she was a Teach for India fellow, a classicist at the University of Oxford. When not at work, she can be found skateboarding, playing board games, or doing embroidery. She loves learning about people and designing environments that help people be their best. We welcome you once again, Shivani. Over to you now.
Thank you so much, Apurva, and thank you to the Arch team for calling me to talk to you guys, and thank you to the participants for lending me your time and attention. I know that there's a lot of content out there, and so I'm grateful that you're spending some time with me. Before I launch in to my talk, I want to make a caveat. I'm not actually a designer, and my journey with leadership is just starting. But what I wanted to do is share with you actually how broad the definition of design is and where there is design in places that we don't expect there to be, and just explore that for a bit. So I don't know about you guys, but I often find myself scrolling through my phone going, oh, just 5 more minutes, and 45 minutes or an hour later, I'm still doom scrolling, whether it's Instagram, whether it's Twitter, it can be anything. The same thing happens. I'll be like, yes, I'm going to go to the gym this evening. And somehow it just doesn't quite work out. And frankly, I used to think this was a discipline problem. But as I've been building the team at Dharohar, as I've been kind of trying to optimize my own life, what I've actually realized is that this is a design problem. And when we usually think of design, we think of kind of facades and decorative elements or product. We think of fashion, we think of cars. What we don't think of, sometimes we even think of interiors and buildings, right? What we don't think of is the environment at a larger level, or at a broader level. And to me, design is really structuring or creating an environment, an atmosphere to deliver a particular end goal. That end goal could be maximizing your own efficiency. That end goal could be deepening a relationship with a colleague or a family member. That end goal could be making it really easy for your food to stay hot when you eat it at lunchtime in your tiffin. But really, design is about solving problems of every kind. And we're designing things without realizing it. And sometimes when we're designing them, we are leading to unintended consequences that we could so easily control. And I want to share with you a few approaches that we found at Dharohar that really help us make sure that we're applying a design lens to everything we're doing. And the first is really this question of function, right? Everyone has heard form follows function, and some people agree, some people disagree. But this ends up so often being a damn surface level thing. We don't dig below, right? This idea of going to the gym, we all know we should, right? It's important to be healthy. But do we take the time to interrogate what is the real reason I am going to the gym? There can actually be many different reasons. Sure, they're all linked in some way. But if I'm going to the gym because I've moved to a new city and I'm trying to find a community, what I need to be doing and what I need to be getting from that experience is very different from if my motivation to go to the gym is to lose a ton of weight. And it's different again from if what I want to do is to be an Olympic level athlete. At some level, there is a shared kind of common ground between these three functions, but they're very, very different. And if I'm struggling to get myself to the gym, but I'm not clear that this is the thing that's most important to me, I will not design that process. I will not build the route that gets me from my house to the gym effectively. I will not align my incentives. The same thing occurs in a workplace, right? There are many things that are important to us when we run a team. We want them to deliver on time. We want them to deliver high quality work. We want them to be aligned with our culture. We want them to be growing and learning. But until we're clear what is the most important thing, until we have made that very difficult decision of prioritizing one function, we're not able to optimize for it. And I think this is something that actually at work we're still sometimes asked to do. In our personal lives, we tend to wander through going, haan, kar rahe, which is we're doing it. To get back to it, let me know if the visual cuts out at any other point. Yeah. So it's really important that we're very, very clear about why we're engaging in anything or why we're designing a particular product, whether it's a application form to apply to college, whether it is how we structure our day, whether it's actually how we arrange things in our cupboard. Once we're clear on what that function is, we're much more likely to engage in the behaviors that we want. Okay, I've identified the function. What do I do with this information? One thing I want you guys to think about is this concept of friction. Very often in design school, we're told you're constantly trying to reduce friction. And that's true. If there's a behavior I want to do, I want to make that easier. The flip side also applies. If there is something I want someone to do slowly and thoughtfully, I actually want to increase the friction there. Or if there's something I want to stop myself or other people from doing, I want to increase the friction there. So here I want to give you a little bit of a story. This is from the research that Cass Sunstein and Richard Thaler did in the US. And they were looking at how do we help people save more for retirement, okay? That's a good thing. Most people want to do it. But when we're starting out our career, it can be tempting ki we want more in hand, right? We don't want a certain percentage of our salary to go and be saved for a rainy day. And when they started this study, they found about 42% of people in this business opted for the 401k, which is an equivalent to RPF. And they made one simple change. Instead of on people's emolument sheets or salary sheets saying you can opt in to your 401k, they just assumed that everyone wanted to opt in. And there was a box which said, I'd like to opt out. So before you'd have checked a box saying, I want to opt in. Now you will simply check your box to say, I want to opt out. It's a tiny bit of friction. But switching it from an opt-in system to an opt-out system actually jumped the percentage of people who signed up for that 401k to above 90%. I think it was 91%. You could get 50% of people to just go along with it because that was the default, right? It doesn't have to be a huge amount of friction that you've added, but just a small amount. Similarly, on a kind of more mundane example, there were schools that were trying to look at how do we reduce the consumption of junk food. Now, they said we can increase the prices of the junk food, we can have less of it in stock. Then they tried something even simpler. The fruit used to lie underneath the counter. They just took that and put it on the shelf right in front as you walk past. And the chips and chocolate they put underneath. The only change was now you had to bend down to pick up a packet of chips. That's not a huge amount of friction, especially for children. And again, they found a 30 to 40% jump in the number of kids choosing to eat fruit. Now, this is kind of cool. It's also kind of dangerous, right? We're in environments all the time, and every environment will have some default. We can set these defaults up to serve the behavior we want. We can also set them up to serve the behavior we don't. What is it that makes a Facebook or an Instagram or social media so addictive? They've really reduced the friction for you to scroll endlessly. It's much easier. You don't have to make an active choice to keep scrolling. Now, what does that mean for us as individuals or us as organizations? It means that we think about how to make opting out of painful but good behaviors harder, right? We make it so that in some of our meetings, people put their phones in the center of the room, right? If we really want focus, we just ask people to put them in a box in the center of the room. It's still there, it's still accessible, but you have to now get out of your seat, reach into the middle of that box and take it out. It's a very small change, but it has allowed us to create more engagement and more quality attention. And these are things that you can do yourself, right? Lock your phone in a drawer, give it to a friend. It's very, very simple, but they really change the outcomes you can get. And the second idea that I want to share with you is the power of feelings, right? We think humans are incredibly rational. We make a logical plan and we follow through on it. The truth of the matter is, we're not. Most of the times, we're coming up with reasons why we did what we did. This is all a little bit of a confabulation. And so, if there is something that I want to get myself to do, or I want to get someone else to do, I really need to think about how it makes them feel, right? The wonderful author, American author Maya Angelou said, people will forget everything that you said and you did. They will never forget how you made them feel, right? And an interesting extension to this is as humans, we're really wired to remember the start of something and the end of something. Even if the middle was a bit blah, we tend to forget it. There was this insane study where they looked at people who'd had colonoscopies. Now, colonoscopy is a really painful procedure. They stick a camera into your gut and they wiggle it about till they've got the photos they need. Now, as you can imagine, this is a painful process, right? And they surveyed how people felt throughout their colonoscopy and how painful they remembered that colonoscopy as being 2 weeks later. And what they found was patients who'd had like a smooth start and a smooth finish to the procedure, but the middle was really painful. Several days later, actually said that was fine. But people who'd had an overall less painful procedure, but the ending was bad or the start was really bad, remembered it as being awful. So, how are we making the start and end of whatever we're doing feel great, right? So, when we think about going to the gym, are we walking out of the gym berating ourselves for saying, dude, you only lifted that much, or you could have done so much more, that guy was doing so much more? Obviously, next time there will be more internal friction from wanting to go. Or have we created a ritual for ourselves which goes, yeah, man, I'm the man, I'm the boss, I did really well, right? Just by tweaking how I feel about that experience, I've tweaked how much I want to do it and don't want to do it. The same thing can apply by thinking carefully about the environment in which we're working. Some people work really well in a quiet, structured office environment, and that's where they do their best work. They would find it very stressful to go and work in a cafe. For someone else, that's going to be what brings them alive. But have we taken the time to think about the people we're designing for and the feeling we're going to elicit in them? Because when we elicit strong emotion in someone, we're creating a very, very clear message that this is what's really important. So, for example, in Dharohar, when we get new team members joining us, we don't on day one start with what are our policies and how do you file expenses and all of that. To us, going back to that question of function, the most important thing is that they become embedded into the fabric of our team. They understand our culture and why we do what we do. So the first thing we give them is a bag full of really random objects. And each of those random objects relates to one of our core behaviors or values. And we ask them to think about which object goes with which and why we've chosen those to be important. And it's kind of one of those experiences where there's a lot of laughter, there's a lot of silly mistakes. It's really fun. So what happens is that within the first day, people have really understood that, hey, it's okay if you'll get to your KPIs and your goals and milestones a little later. But these values and these ways in which Dharohar shows up in the world are sacrosanct. You can't mess with those. And that's something that sticks because it's built to evoke emotion. And then the third strategy that I want to share with you is one that I use very often. And this is called future fixing. Now, there is the person I am today, and then there is an imaginary version of me, which is my future self, right? All of us want to eat healthy next week. But at lunch, we're kind of like, oh, but a burger would be nice or a pizza would be nice. Current me will often make choices which are immediately gratifying. But when I am choosing for my future self, I will choose things that are good for me, that align with my values, that are maybe in the short term not that fun, but that are great for me in the long term. And that's where future fixing becomes really powerful. What can I do in July 2022 that fixes me to having good habits in August 2022, right? Is it that I have committed publicly that I will have run a 10K, right? And I've told enough people who I'd be really embarrassed if I then didn't follow through on that. A really extreme example I've heard of this, there is an app, I can't remember the name of it, where you put in what your commitment is, you assign who is going to validate whether you met that commitment or not. And if you fail your commitment, you have to donate money to a charity that you're really against, to a cause that you don't believe in. So today's me has kind of put some skin in the game for following through on something that I know will be difficult. Now, what does that look like in terms of team or the workplace? Every organization is committed to being a learning workplace where we want people to develop. But in the rapid press of things, when there's too much to do, that often slips down the priority. So in Dharohar, we have a very, very simple rule, which we've had since the early 2016s, where there is 2 hours a week, every week, which is just chalked out for learning time. People can learn what they want. People can learn in small groups. They can learn in big groups. The only thing they can't do in that 2 hours is do work as usual. They cannot be working on operational things. And we come back together and we report to each other, okay, today I learned this, Manish learned this. And sometimes when that Friday morning slot comes around, we go, oh no, there's so much work, we want to not do this. But because we've already made that commitment, and it's a commitment as a whole team, it becomes very, very hard to back out from that, right? So we've made it easy for future us to make good choices. So these are just 3 strategies that we think about when we're designing, whether it's processes, whether it's actual objects or programs, or even the services we deliver, that help us really maximize on delivering our function as efficiently as possible. So I'd really like to just open the floor up for any questions. I've put kind of 4 sources. Some of them I've drawn directly from, others have shaped my thinking when putting this talk together. But for anyone who's interested in behavioral science, behavioral psychology, these are 4 resources that you might find interesting. So yeah, does anyone have any questions?
So, thank you, Shivani. I think for me, perhaps whatever you spoke about, it's such an integral part of design thinking. That's what, or maybe designing spaces or understanding people. In the current scenario that I see, and I have had the opportunity to interact with students for the past 4 years, and I've been into design for the past 10 years. So I feel that we as designers, we have the basic thing is to first of all be a problem solver. That is the idea, and that is a sustainable idea. That is what the world is looking for. And because there are a lot of changes perhaps that have happened, and when we had COVID, we got a different idea of life, which we never thought that existed. So now the entire design has changed, and the kind of lifestyle that we want to live also has changed. So I really loved what you spoke. And I have a question, that what has been, since you have designed, the idea of the Dharohar, and you've been, the whole functioning is happening. What has been the most crucial learning from this entire experience?
It's a really interesting question. It's hard to pin down one, but one that I keep coming back to is how important it is to be bad at things and to get things wrong before you get them right. All the way through school and college, we're programmed to get one shot at anything, right? आपने maths homework करा and you submit your maths homework, आपको वापस करने को नहीं मिलता है. It's as right or as wrong as it happened to be. But actually, in the real world, if you want to build anything meaningful, you frankly have to be lousy at stuff before you're good at it. And that applies all the way from like cooking to starting your first job to designing a form. At Dharohar, like I said, I'm not a designer by training, but I've worked on building HR processes, building exhibits that we take into schools, developing curriculum, all kinds of things. And for each of them, we do a not very good job. It's the best that we can do at that time. We put it out into the world and then we make it better. Before, for me, there was this instinctive kind of pull back that, wait, no, I want to make it right and then put it into the world. But you can't make it better and you can't get to excellence without being a little bit rubbish. And that's painful, to go back to that sense of feelings. But how do I make peace with being aware that being rubbish is going to feel bad? There's a fabulous quote by Ira Glass, which I'll try and send over a link to Ashi and she can share with you. And I think they talk about how people get into the creative fields because they have really great taste. They have a discerning eye or a discerning palate, and then they start making stuff. And because they have great taste and no skill, they're really aware of how rubbish their work is. And a lot of people give up because that gap seems too big. But actually, you have to stay the course and keep producing and keep putting things out into the world till your skill has reached up to where your taste was.
Well, I think we're waiting for more questions to come in. Could you also, I feel that what you've displayed on the screen is about nudge and perfectly irrational, the power of moments. So could you just tell something about these, whatever you've listed, and what has been your learning, or probably you can take one of them, like the power of moments, Chip and Dan Heath by Chip and Dan. So what is it all about, and how is it how it helps? Because there is a lot of this perhaps deals with the psychology and how people whatever I'm engaging is, and when we have to design, we have to take the consumer in the picture. That's the bigger picture that we paint as designers. So any one of the things that you have listed, if you could just brief us more about it.
I'm actually going to start slightly sideways from that question. I think, again, partly as a function of our education system, we get a sense that if I'm a designer, I should read about design. Great designers learn about the world. They fall into rabbit holes, whether it's psychology or whether it's aeroplanes or whether it's it's the Second World War or whether it's the socio-political development of the Balkans. To be a great problem solver, you need to be able to connect ideas from here, 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 here in ways that other people aren't. That's what innovation is. And so something I'd really push students to do is find out what they're interested in and get really geeky about it. Um, we need, and for me, that's looked like I got super interested in psychology, the human mind, what makes people tick. And that's where at least the first three of these references come from, right? Nudge and Perfectly Irrational, they are seminal texts from the science of behavioral economics. And they look at how economic theory has always looked at humans as rational actors, and people will always do the rational thing, but they don't. And what are the ways in which we're irrational? How can those things be actually used? How can we make that a feature rather than a flaw? 99% Invisible is an amazing podcast by this guy called Roman Mars, who will look at the design and the detailed thinking that went into something like an escalator handle, or kind of the tube map of London. And he picks apart where we see design when we're not expecting it, and what are the hidden elements of design. And again, it's interesting. It adds to the bucket of ideas which you have in your head, which you can then draw on. Because to be able to have ways of adding friction, to play with people's feelings, you need kind of that library in your head. And this is just a way of, maybe suggesting some places people who are interested in the human mind can build their internal library.
I request everybody to ask questions, because what I see, that the session is about innovation. There was a lot of innovation that Shivani spoke about, and I would request all the students to perhaps frame your question in terms of design thinking and in terms of innovation, in terms of understanding people, because that's the core of design today, in my aspect. Nani, I'll ask you one more question, and this perhaps comes from the students also. Uh, See, you were an entrepreneur, and you are completely sensitive when it comes to building this space that you have designed in Dharohar. Okay, what inspired you? Like something that was there in your childhood, or something that you saw. What was that piece of inspiration? Because I've had a conversation with my students yesterday, and we know they also were doing a little bit of research about the rover. So this question popped in, and if you could just like talk about what inspired you.
I think I don't think there's any one thing. And again, going back to what have I learned along this journey, I think we often wait for inspiration, motivation, these things to come from outside. It was a series of choices and experiences and things that I did that over time led me to the next thing and then to the next thing. So, for example, when I was very young, I think I was maybe 6.5, 7, I moved from Udaipur to the UK. And I had a very different school experience. In Udaipur, I was constantly in trouble, never did well. And because I used to ask a lot of questions, I wasn't very good at doing what I was told. So I spent more time as a murga than a human. Whereas in the UK, I really did well. And for me, that was, even as a 7-year-old, there was a question in my head of, wait, I'm the same human. I can't have gone from being really stupid to not stupid just by crossing an ocean. That's not how it works. And for me, that's where the sense of creating spaces where people can learn joyfully, people can feel like they're enough, that started to become important. It's also something that's always been important in my home and in my family. So keeping on learning, encouraging others to learn, creating environments for learning, it's something that we've talked about the whole way through. Then once I started work, I worked with some absolutely incredible bosses. I also worked for some really terrible bosses. And from each of those, whether you call it inspiration or you call it just, I don't know, a sense of direction, I went, I'm never going to be like this. This will never happen on my watch. These are things that I really emulate and skills that I hope to gain. And to go back to that last question of being infinitely curious and infinite, like becoming an infinite learner, that applies to finding inspiration also. There is inspiration to be found as you're walking down the road and passing the pani puri ka thela and the chai ki tapri. There is also inspiration to be found in hearing Amartya Sen talk. Uh, but you have to be open to that, and you have to have kind of switched your mind on to kind of like receive more.
Is there any other thing, perhaps, Shivani, that you could like? Because what interesting thing that I got from your answer was that you were in Udaipur and you were asking questions, and you were told to do something. Whereas when you went to UK, UK was more of a free space that instilled you to probably ask those questions and to probably find out new answers. So design anyhow works on that aspect in any of the design schools that are there. What would you recommend when it comes to the education in India? Like, what is something that you felt that we don't have, whether it is design or whether it is, other streams that you are? What is the basic thing that you feel that India should have, or the Indian education system should have, so that we produce people who are sensitive towards the situation that India is going through? Because I believe that we have a lot of, we have engaged, we have the young power with us today, and we really need to put uh, that creative mind or the young mind into working, into making India a better place in the coming 10 years. So, what is something that you feel is should be there in the education system of India?
So I think the system is a very large, complex endeavor. But I would say that actually at a micro level, at an individual level, there's a quotation from this activist called Margaret Mead, which says, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And this idea of personal agency is absolutely essential. And it's something that I feel really inspired by. We have the privilege of working with a lot of young people, from all the way from like 7, 8 years old to their mid 20s. And the hunger I see to do something, to build something, to create in them is huge. And actually, that sense of confidence कि हम भारत के हैं और हम कुछ करके दिखाएंगे is massive. I think that is, like you're saying, it's a huge asset that we have. And we just, each of us have to individually do our best to deliver on that promise. To remember that no matter how crazy and intractable a problem might seem, if you start to eat that elephant bite by bite, the elephant will be eaten. And if many of us are doing that, the elephant will be eaten that much faster. So just that really powerful sense of agency that mere karne se kuch hoga. I can do something. And that partly comes from the environment you're in, but it also partly comes from just showing up, jumping in and trying things, doing things and failing, doing things and failing again. And I think opportunities to do that are key. So if there's something that institutionally should be provided, I would say it's that.
Wonderful thing that you said. मेरे करने से कुछ होगा. The other thing happens. There is a thought process that मेरे करने से, मेरे छोटे step से क्या होगा. But there is a school of thought. It says मेरे करने से ही होगा. So yeah, that is something very beautiful. I believe that I think and no more questions. But Shivani, it was wonderful to have you and to have that space where, the kind of space that you provided and your experience, and certainly I feel that whatever you've shared today, that aspect is very, very important for all the students, people who are here, academicians, because that is the core thing of design. That's how the spirit of design is. That we provide solutions and we solve problems. Because that creative bent or that innovation makes the whole difference. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for being with us. And on behalf of the Arch family, I thank you again. And thank you so much for sharing your experience with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.